The canyon winds cut through Hana's thin clothing like frozen knives. She pressed her hand against the bleeding wound on her side and forced herself to keep running. Behind her, somewhere in the maze of red stone and dust, the Vrex hunters were closing in. She could hear their scanners pinging off the rock walls, each sound bringing them closer to finding her. Her legs burned with exhaustion. 3 days of running with barely any rest had pushed her body far beyond its limits. The pale blue skin of her arms was covered in scrapes and bruises from falling on the sharp rocks. Her bioluminescent markings, normally bright and controlled, flickered weakly like dying lights. That was bad. When a Velian's markings started to fade, it meant the body was shutting down. Hana stumbled over a loose stone and barely caught herself against a boulder. She needed to hide. She needed water. She needed medicine. But most of all, she needed them to stop hunting her. The data chip hidden in her boot felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Such a small thing to die for. But the information on that chip could save millions of lives across a dozen colonies. If she could just survive long enough to get it to someone who mattered. The scanner sounds grew louder. They were maybe half a kilometer behind her now. Hana pushed away from the boulder and forced her legs to move again. The canyon curved ahead, and she followed it around the bend, desperately hoping for anything that could help her. That was when she saw it. Or rather, almost didn't see it dot at first. It looked like just another section of the canyon wall. Red stone stacked on red stone, weathered by centuries of wind and sand. But something was wrong about it. The shadows fell at slightly wrong angles. The color was just a shade too perfect. Hana had been trained as a scout, and her people had senses far sharper than most species in the galaxy. She trusted those instincts now. She approached the wall carefully, running her hands over the stone. Her fingers found the edge of something that shouldn't exist. A seam. Too straight to be natural, too precise to be random erosion. She pressed harder, and a section of rock shifted under her touch. The hidden door was so well camouflaged that even her trained eyes could barely track where it ended and the real stone began. Whatever built this understood concealment better than anyone she had ever known. The door swung inward silently, revealing darkness beyond. Hana didn't hesitate. She slipped inside and pulled the door closed behind her. The scanner sounds were very close now, maybe 200 meters. She held her breath in the darkness and waited. Through the door, she heard the Vrex pass by. Their heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel outside. Their scanners swept the area with electronic whines. But they kept moving. They didn't stop. They didn't find the door. After a few minutes, the sounds faded into the distance. Only then did Hana let herself breathe. She sagged against the wall, her whole body shaking from fear and exhaustion. She was safe. For now, her eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light. The space beyond the door was larger than she expected. Not a cave, but a constructed shelter. And it was clearly made by human hands. Hana had seen human construction before, but always in official facilities or military bases. This was different, personal. The walls were reinforced with salvaged metal panels. The floor had been leveled and covered with some kind of sealed concrete. Dim lights mounted in the ceiling activated as she moved. Responding to her presence with a soft glow. She explored carefully, her scout training overriding her exhaustion. The shelter had multiple rooms carved into the rock. A main living area with a table and chair. A storage room filled with sealed containers of food and supplies. A small medical station with basic equipment. A sleeping area with a narrow bed. And everywhere she looked, she saw the same pattern of careful, efficient design. The technology was strange to her. Where Velian equipment relied on quantum processors and exotic materials, everything here was mechanical and simple. Water moved through physical pipes, not force fields. Air filtered through layers of mesh and carbon, not particle scrubbers. Power came from what looked like a geothermal tap buried deep in the rock. Using heat from the planet's core dot, it should have seemed primitive. Instead, it seemed brilliant. Hana found the medical station and collapsed into the chair beside it. Her wound was still bleeding, and she needed to stop it before she lost too much blood. The supplies were clearly labeled in Standard, the common language used for trade across the galaxy. Antiseptic, bandages, synthetic skin, even some basic surgical tools. She cleaned the wound as best she could, gritting her teeth against the pain. The laser burn from the Vrex weapon had cut deep, but it had missed anything vital. She applied the synthetic skin and wrapped it with bandages. It would heal, given time. After treating her injury, Hana let herself examine the shelter more carefully. Dust covered many of the surfaces. Not thick dust, but enough to show that no one had been here for at least a few weeks. Maybe longer. The bed was neatly made. The supplies were organized with military precision. Everything had a place and a purpose. She found preserved food in the storage room and felt a pang of guilt as she opened one of the containers. But she needed to eat, and whoever owned this place wasn't here. She would find a way to repay them somehow, if she ever met them. The food was simple but filling. Some kind of protein bar with a taste she couldn't quite identify. It gave her enough energy to keep moving. She drank water from a filtration tap that produced clean, cold liquid from somewhere deep underground. As darkness fell outside, Hana made a decision. She would stay here for a few days, just long enough to heal and let the Vrex move on. The shelter was hidden so well that they would never find it. The supplies would last, and she desperately needed the rest. She sealed the inner door and activated what looked like a security system. Lights on a panel shifted from red to green, showing that the shelter was locked and protected. Then she made her way to the sleeping area and lay down on the narrow bed. For the first time in days, Hana felt safe. The fear that had been driving her forward finally loosened its grip. Her eyes grew heavy as exhaustion caught up with her body. She fell asleep, wondering who would build such a perfect hiding place, and whether they would mind that she had found it. 3 days passed in the shelter like a strange dream. Hana's wound healed faster than she expected, thanks to the medical supplies and the chance to finally rest. She spent the time carefully exploring every corner of the shelter, learning how its systems worked, and marveling at the simple genius behind each design. The air filtration system fascinated her most. It used layers of different materials to clean the air, each layer removing specific particles or gases. No power-hungry force fields, no exotic quantum filters, just physics and chemistry working together in perfect harmony. She had never seen anything like it. She tried to disturb as little as possible. Every time she used a supply, she made a mental note of it. She planned to replace everything when she could. The owner of this shelter had clearly put years of work into building it. The least she could do was leave it as she found it. The Vrex hunters had passed through the area twice more. Each time, Hana heard their scanners sweeping the canyon. Each time, the shelter's strange shielding kept her hidden. Whatever materials the walls were made from, they scattered sensor beams like light through broken glass. The hunters never even slowed down as they passed. On the morning of the 4th day, Hana was checking her wound when she heard something that made her blood freeze. The sound of the outer door opening. She stood up fast, her heart hammering in her chest. Had the Vrex found her? But no, there were no alarms. No sounds of weapons charging. Just the quiet mechanical click of the door sealing shut again. Then the inner door began to open. Hana backed against the wall, her mind racing through possibilities. She had no weapon, no way to fight. If this was an enemy, she was trapped. Her bioluminescent markings flared bright with fear, pulsing in patterns she couldn't control. The door swung open, and a human stepped through, his arms loaded with salvaged equipment and supply containers. He wore practical clothes covered in dust and oil. His dark hair was longer than military standard, but shorter than civilian fashion. His face showed the weathering of someone who spent most of their time outdoors. He saw her immediately and froze in place. For several long heartbeats, neither of them moved. The human's eyes took in everything at once. Her position against the wall, her healing wound, the medical supplies she had used, the empty food containers. He understood the entire situation in seconds. That calculating intelligence in his gaze terrified Hana more than any weapon. The Galactic Consortium taught that humans were unpredictable. Sometimes they helped. Sometimes they killed. Sometimes they did both for reasons no one else could understand. This human was reading her like a technical manual, processing data faster than any computer. Hana's markings pulsed brighter, betraying her fear. She couldn't stop the biological response, even though she knew. It made her look weak. The human slowly lowered the equipment to the floor. He kept his hands visible and moved with careful deliberation. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured. "You're hurt." It wasn't a question. It was a simple observation of fact. Hana found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "I can leave. I will replace everything I used. I thought the shelter was abandoned." The human tilted his head slightly, studying her. "The Vrex don't give up easily. They've been through this area 6 times in the past week. You won't make it half a kilometer before they find you." "How do you know about the Vrex?" "I know about everything that happens in these canyons." He moved to the table and began unpacking his equipment. "My name is Quan. This is my shelter. And you're safe here, but only if you follow my rules." Hana felt a wave of relief so strong it nearly made her knees buckle. He wasn't going to force her out. He wasn't going to turn her in. But the relief came with new questions. "Why would you help me?" Quan looked at her with something that might have been amusement. "I'm not helping you yet. I'm making a practical decision. You found my shelter, which means you're either very skilled or very lucky. Either way, throwing you out to get caught benefits no one. The Vrex would torture you for information, and eventually you would tell them about this place. Then I would have to abandon years of work and start somewhere new. I wouldn't tell them anything. Everyone tells them everything. The Vrex are experts at breaking people." Quan pulled out a small device and set it on the table. "Now, are you going to tell me why they want you badly enough to bring a full hunting pack to an empty mining colony?" Hana hesitated. She had been running alone for so long that trusting anyone felt dangerous. But Quan already held all the power here. If he wanted to turn her in, he could do it easily. And something about his direct, practical manner made her want to trust him. "I have information. Evidence about the Galactic Consortium's weapons program. They're testing biological weapons on civilian populations. Entire colonies. I stole the data files proving it." Quan's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Where's the data now?" "Hidden. Not here. I'm not stupid enough to bring that kind of attention to someone else's shelter." That almost smile appeared again. "Good. That was a test. If you had told me it was here, I would have known you were either lying or foolish enough to endanger both of us." He picked up one of the containers he had brought in. "Are you allergic to anything?" "I have real food, not just the preserved rations." The sudden change of subject caught Hana off guard. "No, I mean, Velians can eat most standard foods." "Then you'll help me prepare dinner while you tell me exactly what you know about the Consortium's weapons program. I spent 5 years designing defensive systems for colony protection. I want to know what they're using them for now." Over the next hour, as they worked together in the small kitchen area, Hana told him everything. The research facilities hidden in asteroid bases. The test subjects taken from populations that wouldn't be missed. The carefully documented results that proved the consortium was developing weapons that could target specific genetic markers. Quan listened without judgment, asking precise questions that cut straight to the technical details. He understood the implications faster than most of the officials Hana had tried to contact. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I used to work for them," he finally said. "Not the weapons program. Colony defense. I designed shielding systems, early warning sensors, emergency protocols. I thought I was protecting people." He looked at her directly. "Then I found out they were selling my designs to both sides of conflicts, creating problems so they could sell solutions. I left. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here." Quan served the food onto 2 plates. "The Vrex commander tracking you is named Veth. He's persistent and smart. He won't leave until he finds you or gets called off by someone higher up the chain." "How do you know his name?" "I listen to their communications. I've been tracking their movements since they arrived." Quan sat down at the table. "You're going to need to stay here longer than a few days. Maybe weeks. Maybe months. Are you prepared for that?" Hana sat down across from him, still not quite believing this was happening. "I don't have much choice. There's always a choice. But right now, your best option is to learn how to survive here properly. Starting tomorrow, I'll teach you how my systems really work. You've been using them like a villain. That's inefficient and dangerous." Despite everything, Hana felt something like hope. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. My rules are strict, and I don't accept mistakes that could get us both killed. But if you can learn, you'll be safer here than anywhere else in this sector." Quan started eating. "Now eat. You need more protein if that wound is going to finish healing properly." As Hana ate the first real meal she had tasted in weeks, she watched the human across from her. She had been taught to fear their unpredictability. But Quan wasn't unpredictable. He was practical, direct, and completely honest about his motivations. That scared her more than anything else, because it meant he was exactly what the galaxy whispered about humans. Not cruel or kind, not good or evil, just absolutely determined to survive on his own terms, no matter what it took. The first week of learning was humbling for Hana. Everything she thought she understood about the shelter was wrong. Every system she had used incorrectly. Quan demonstrated this with the patience of someone teaching a child, but also with the firmness of someone who knew that mistakes could be fatal. "You've been filtering the air at maximum capacity," Quan said on the second day, pointing at the control panel. "That works for Velian technology with unlimited power. Here, it drains the geothermal tap and creates heat signatures that scanners can detect. You run it at 30% unless there's an emergency." Hana watched as he adjusted the settings. The difference was barely noticeable in air quality, but massive in power consumption. But the air quality readings showed it was safe. Safe isn't the same as smart. Safe means you can breathe. Smart means you can breathe without being detected. Quan pulled up a display showing the shelter's power distribution. Every system in here has 2 modes: survival mode and hidden mode. You've been running everything in survival mode. He spent hours teaching her the difference. The water filtration system could produce 20 liters per day, but that created vibrations in the rock that seismic sensors might catch. Running it at 5 liters per day was silent and sufficient. The lights could illuminate the entire shelter, but keeping them at minimum made the power signature almost invisible. "Velian technology assumes you have resources," Quan explained. "Human technology assumes you have nothing. So we designed for efficiency first, capability second." But it wasn't just about the technical systems. Quan had routines that seemed strange until he explained their purpose. He cooked meals at specific times because the thermal bloom from the stove could be masked during the natural temperature changes of morning and evening. He exercised in patterns that kept his muscles ready for sudden action. He even slept in shifts, training his body to wake at any unusual sound. "You live like you're always under siege," Hannah observed. "I'm always under siege. The universe doesn't care about my plans or my comfort. It will kill me the moment I get lazy or stupid." Quan cleaned his tools with methodical care. The difference between survival and death is usually just paying attention. Hannah found herself both fascinated and disturbed by his worldview. Velians valued community and cooperation. They built their society on the idea that working together made everyone stronger. Quan seemed to assume that he could only truly rely on himself. Yet despite his self-sufficiency, he was a good teacher. He showed her how to read the sensor data from his early warning system, explaining what each type of signal meant. He taught her the communication codes he used to monitor Vrex transmissions. He even demonstrated the hidden weapon systems he had built into the shelter's defenses. This isn't just a hiding place, Hannah realized. It's a fortress. It's both. The best defense is never being found. The second best defense is being ready when you are found. Quan showed her a panel that controlled various defensive measures. These are kinetic launchers, simple spring-loaded mechanisms that fire metal spheres. No energy signature, no electronic components to jam, just physics. That seems primitive. Primitive works when advanced fails. The Vrex rely on electromagnetic shielding that stops energy weapons and guided missiles. These metal spheres are dumb, fast, and heavy. Their shields can't stop simple momentum. He closed the panel. Never assume that complicated is better. Assume that working is better. As the days passed, Hannah began to understand the philosophy behind everything Quan built. It wasn't about having the best technology. It was about having technology that couldn't be defeated by the technology meant to defeat technology. It was circular thinking that somehow made perfect sense. She also began to see why Quan lived alone. He wasn't antisocial or cruel. He was simply someone who had learned not to depend on systems that could fail or people who could leave. His shelter was an extension of that philosophy. Everything had backups. Every backup had alternatives. Every alternative had a manual override. "You don't trust anything," Hannah said one evening as they ate dinner. "I trust physics. I trust chemistry. I trust mathematics." Quan paused. "I trust things that don't change based on politics or profit." "What about people?" "People are variables. Sometimes they're good variables. Sometimes they're bad variables. But they're always variables." He looked at her directly. "You're a variable too. I'm helping you because it serves my interests. If that changes, my actions change." Hannah should have found that cold. Instead, she found it honest. Quan didn't pretend to be her friend. He didn't make promises he might not keep. He simply stated the truth of their arrangement and let her make her own choices within that framework. But on the 10th day, something changed. Quan was monitoring the Vrex communications when his expression went dark. Hannah saw his jaw tighten and his fingers move faster across the controls. "What is it?" "They've brought in a specialist. A tracker named Yuna." Quan pulled up a data file. "She's human. Former military scout. She went independent 5 years ago and now works for whoever pays the most. A human is hunting me? Humans will hunt anyone if the price is right. We're not naturally noble. We're naturally adaptable." Quan studied the data. Yuna is good. Very good. She found a pirate base that had stayed hidden for 20 years. She tracked a fugitive across 3 star systems using evidence no one else could see. Hannah felt her hope crumbling. If she's that good, she'd find this shelter. Maybe. Maybe not. Quan stood and moved to a different control panel. She's good at finding what she's looking for. The trick is making sure she looks in the wrong places. What are you doing? Changing our strategy. Up until now, I've been keeping us hidden. Passive defense. But passive defense against an active hunter only works for so long. His fingers danced across the controls. Now I'm going to give her things to find. Over the next few hours, Hana watched as Quan activated systems she didn't even know existed. False heat signatures began appearing in the canyon network, mimicking the pattern of someone trying to hide. Recorded movement data started playing back through concealed transmitters. Old campsites that Quan had used months ago suddenly showed fresh activity. You're creating decoys, Hana said. I'm creating a maze. Every false trail she investigates wastes time and resources. Every empty campsite makes her question her methods. And while she's chasing shadows, we're preparing for the moment she stops chasing shadows. Quan activated another system, because she will eventually narrow it down. Yuna is too good not to. Then what do? Then we see if she's as good at finding someone who's ready for her as she is at finding someone who's running scared. Quan looked at Hana. I need to know something. The data you stole. How important is it really? Important enough to die for? Hana thought about the files she had hidden. The research reports showing entire populations exposed to experimental weapons. The death tolls carefully documented. The plans for wider deployment. It's important enough that millions of people will die if it stays hidden. Quan nodded slowly. Then it's important enough to fight for. Tomorrow, I'll show you how to use the defensive systems. If Yuna finds us, I'll need you to be more than a liability. You're going to fight her? Another human? If necessary? Yuna made her choice when she took the Vrex contract. I made mine when I let you stay here. He powered down the decoy systems. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. As Hana lay in her bed that night, she thought about the strange alliance she had formed with this isolated human. Quan was teaching her not just to hide, but to fight. Not just to survive, but to be ready for anything. She had been taught that humans were unpredictable. But Quan wasn't unpredictable at all. He was absolutely consistent. He identified problems and solved them with whatever tools he had available. He didn't hope for good outcomes. He planned for bad ones and prepared accordingly. It should have been a depressing way to live. Instead, Hana found it strangely comforting. Because for the first time since she started running, she wasn't just hoping to survive. She was preparing to survive. And there was a massive difference between those two things. Yuna arrived in the canyon network like a professional storm. Quan tracked her movements through his sensor network, watching as she systematically dismantled his decoys. She didn't waste time investigating obvious false trails. Instead, she marked them on her map and used them to build a pattern of what not to look for. She's good, Quan admitted, watching the data streams. Better than I expected. She investigated 3 decoy sites in 2 hours and correctly identified all of them as fakes. Hana stood beside him, learning to read the sensor displays the way he had taught her. How can she tell they're fake? She's reading the evidence I left behind. Old thermal patterns. Disturbed dust that's weathered too much. She knows how long things take to degrade in this environment. Quan zoomed in on Yuna's current position. She's also using equipment I don't recognize. Some kind of atmospheric analyzer. What does that detect? Air composition. Every shelter produces a slightly different atmospheric signature based on what the people inside eat, breathe, and excrete. It's almost impossible to hide completely. Quan made a note on his own map. But almost impossible isn't the same as impossible. He activated a new set of systems. Throughout the canyon network, concealed vents began releasing carefully measured amounts of gas. carbon dioxide, methane, trace organic compounds. Each vent created a subtle atmospheric anomaly that could be someone's hiding place. More decoys? Hannah asked. More noise. If everything looks suspicious, nothing looks suspicious. She'll have to investigate each signature personally to rule it out. Quan watched as Yuna's path shifted toward the nearest vent. That buys us time. But time was running out faster than Quan had planned. The Vrex weren't just relying on Yuna. They had established a perimeter around a 5-kilometer radius and were slowly tightening it. Their commander, Veth, was using a classic military approach. Systematic, methodical, inevitable. They're going to find us eventually, Hannah said. It wasn't a question. Yes, the question is whether they find us before we're ready or after. Quan pulled up a schematic of the shelter's defensive systems. I've been preparing for this scenario for 3 years. Now we get to find out if my preparations were good enough. He spent the next day teaching Hannah how to operate the weapon systems. The kinetic launchers that could fire metal spheres at high velocity. The chemical dispersal units that could fill sections of the canyon with smoke or tear gas. The emergency barriers that could seal off approach routes. This is a lot of firepower for someone who claims to just want to be left alone. Hannah observed. Being left alone and being prepared to not be left alone aren't contradictory. They're complementary. Quan demonstrated the firing solution computer. This system is entirely mechanical. No electronics to jam or hack. You input the target's range and bearing using these dials, and it calculates the trajectory using gears and levers. Hannah practiced with the system until she could operate it smoothly. The technology was ancient by galactic standards, but it worked with a reliability that electronic systems couldn't match. No power requirements. No software errors. Just simple machines doing exactly what they were designed to do. On the 3rd day after Yuna's arrival, Quan's early warning system detected new activity. The Vrex were bringing in heavy equipment. Seismic sensors. Atmospheric analyzers. Ground-penetrating radar. They were done with subtle searching. They're going to scan every cubic meter of rock in this area, Quan said, watching the deployment. Looking for voids, air pockets, artificial structures. Can they find us? The shelter's walls have a layered composition that scatters most scanning frequencies. But with enough power and enough angles, they'll eventually get a return signal. Quan pulled up the shelter's power systems. We need to minimize our signature. Starting now, we go to emergency protocols. Emergency protocols meant living in near darkness. Minimal water usage. No cooking. The temperature inside the shelter dropped as Quan shut down the heating system. Hannah found herself shivering despite the thermal blanket he gave her. How long can we stay like this? She asked. Weeks if necessary. Longer if we're disciplined. Quan sat in the darkness, his eyes closed, listening to sensor data through an earpiece. But I don't think it will take that long. Veth is impatient. He'll make a mistake. The waiting was harder than the running had been. At least while running, Hannah had felt like she was doing something. Now she sat in cold darkness while the Vrex methodically scanned the canyon. Every few hours she heard the deep pulse of ground, penetrating radar, washing over the shelter. Each time, Quan checked his instruments to see if they had been detected. On the 5th day, Yuna found something. Not the shelter itself, but one of the escape tunnels. Quan watched through his sensors as she investigated the hidden entrance, her experienced eyes seeing what the Vrex scanners had missed. She knows, Quan said quietly. She can tell that tunnel was excavated, not natural. She's marking it on her map. What do? We wait. One tunnel doesn't prove anything. There are old mining operations all over this colony. She needs more evidence. But Quan's jaw was tight with tension. Yuna found the second tunnel 6 hours later. and the third tunnel the day after that. Each discovery narrowed down the possible location of the main shelter. Hana watched Kwan's face as he tracked the human tracker's progress. He showed no fear, but his preparations became more intense. He activated weapon systems that had been dormant. He checked and rechecked every defensive position. He prepared emergency equipment packs in case they needed to evacuate. And he set up one final system that he hadn't told Hana about before. "What is that?" she asked, watching him wire a complex device to the communications array. "A broadcast relay. If things go bad, I can transmit your data to every civilian frequency in this sector simultaneously. The consortium can't suppress what everyone has already seen." Kwan connected the final wire. "But using it means revealing our position to everyone. It's a last resort. You'd sacrifice your shelter for my data?" "I'd sacrifice my shelter to prove the consortium is murdering civilians for weapon testing. There's a difference." Kwan tested the system. "This shelter can be rebuilt. Those lives can't be brought back." The next morning, Veth made his move. The seismic sensors had finally detected the shelter's location with enough certainty to investigate. A full Vrex strike team assembled outside the hidden entrance, their weapons charged and ready. Juan watched them on his external cameras. 12 soldiers. Heavy armor. Plasma rifles. Portable shield generator. They're not taking chances. Can we stop them? We can make them regret trying. Quan activated the defensive systems. "Remember your training. Stay calm. Follow my instructions. And don't hesitate when I give you a target." The Vrex began cutting through the outer door. It was designed to look like solid rock, but their plasma torches made quick work of it. Quan let them through the first door without resistance. Then he triggered the first defense. A shaped charge detonated in the rock above the entrance tunnel. Not enough to kill, but enough to bring down several tons of stone. The Vrex scattered, but 2 soldiers were caught in the collapse. Not dead, but definitely out of the fight. The remaining 10 soldiers called for mining equipment. They weren't giving up. If anything, the resistance had made them more determined. "They're bringing in excavation drones," Quan reported. "They'll clear that tunnel in an hour." Hana checked her weapon station, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "What's our next move?" "We make them work for every meter." Quan activated another system. Throughout the canyon, his decoy network came alive with maximum intensity. Heat signatures, radio transmissions, movement sensors, everything screaming for attention at once. And we give Yuna a choice. On one of his monitors, Hana could see Yuna watching the assault. The human tracker stood apart from the Vrex, her expression thoughtful. She knew something was wrong. This wasn't a desperate refugee hiding in a hole. This was a prepared defensive position. Quan opened a tight beam communication channel directly to Yuna's equipment. "You're good at finding people. Are you as good at knowing when you've found the wrong fight?" Yuna's head turned sharply, scanning for the signal source. After a moment, she responded, "Quan, I heard you disappeared into the frontier. Didn't expect to find you here. You know me? I know your work. Colony Defense Systems, Krishon Sector. Saved 40,000 people when the Syndicate attacked." Yuna looked at the Vrex excavation operation. "What are you doing mixed up with a Velian fugitive?" "The same thing you should be doing. Asking questions about why the consortium wants her dead badly enough to hire the Vrex." Quan kept his voice calm. "She has evidence of weapon testing on civilians. The kind of evidence that makes people disappear." Yuna was quiet for a long moment. "That's a serious accusation. It's a provable fact. Walk away, Yuna. This isn't the contract you think it is." "I don't walk away from contracts." "Then you're going to help murder someone who's trying to save lives. And you're going to do it for people who experiment on children." Quan closed the channel. Your choice. On the monitor, Yuna stood motionless. Then she turned and walked toward Veth, the Vrex commander. Hana couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see Veth's angry gestures and Yuna's calm responses. What's she doing? Hana asked. Either turning us in or walking away. We'll know in about 30 seconds. Quan kept his hand on the defensive controls. Yuna stepped back from Veth. Then she simply turned and walked out of the canyon. Not running. Not apologizing. Just leaving. Veth stared after her, clearly furious. But he had bigger problems. The excavation drones had cleared the tunnel collapse, and his strike team was ready to advance. He gave the order to proceed. Quan looked at Hana. Here we go. Remember your training. And whatever happens, don't let them take you alive. The Vrex interrogation methods are worse than death. Hana nodded, her bioluminescent markings steady now. No fear showing. Just determination. I'm ready. Good. Quan activated the internal defenses. Let's show them why humans don't give up easily. The first Vrex team entered the tunnel with textbook military precision. 3 soldiers in front with shields. 3 behind with weapons ready. They advanced slowly, scanning for traps and defensive positions. They expected resistance. What they got was education. Quan triggered the second defense when they reached the midpoint of the tunnel. Not an explosive this time, but something simpler. The floor gave way beneath them, dropping the lead soldiers into a pit filled with a sticky polymer compound. Not deadly, but incredibly effective. The soldiers sank into the substance like insects in tree sap, their heavy armor making them helpless. The remaining 3 tried to retreat, but Quan had already sealed the tunnel behind them with a quick-setting foam barrier. They were trapped between the pit and the wall, unable to advance or retreat. 3 down, 7 to go, Quan said calmly. He was watching multiple displays at once, tracking the Vrex response. Veth is bringing up the heavy equipment. Plasma cutters. They'll burn through the foam in about 10 minutes. Hana monitored her own station, watching the approach angles. Why not just kill them? You have weapons that could do it, because killing them makes this personal. Making them look foolish makes them angry and stupid. Angry and stupid enemies make mistakes. Quan adjusted his defenses. Besides, those soldiers are just doing a job. Veth is the one I want to hurt. The Vrex commander was indeed getting angry. Hana could hear his voice over the communication channels, barking orders in the harsh Vrex language. He committed 4 more soldiers to the tunnel assault, while keeping the last 3 as a reserve. This time, they came prepared. They used the plasma cutters to literally carve a new path through the rock, bypassing Quan's traps entirely. It was slower than using the tunnel, but it was safer. They were learning. Smart, Quan acknowledged. But predictable. He activated a new system. In the section of rock where the Vrex were cutting, concealed gas cylinders released a highly flammable vapor. The moment their plasma cutters touched it, the entire tunnel section erupted in flames. The Vrex shields protected them from the initial blast, but the sustained burning forced them to retreat. Their armor could handle brief exposure to fire, but not continuous heat. They fell back, frustrated and singed, but not seriously injured. Veth pulled his forces back to regroup. Quan used the breathing room to check his supplies and redistribute his defenses. Hana saw him making calculations on a paper notepad, using actual pencil and paper instead of electronic displays. You're tracking ammunition, she realized. Resources. Ammunition, power reserves, defensive charges, time, options. Quan showed her the numbers. Every defense I use is one I can't use again. I need to make them count. How long can we hold? Against this force? Days. Maybe a week if I'm creative. Quan put down the notepad. But Veth isn't going to wait that long. He's going to call for orbital support or heavy weapons. Something I can't defend against with kinetic launchers and chemical tricks. As if to prove his point, Quan's sensors detected new arrivals. A Vrex assault shuttle was landing near the canyon entrance. Not reinforcements. Something worse. Mining laser. Quan identified the equipment being unloaded. Industrial grade. Designed to cut through asteroid rock. They're going to dig us out like removing a tumor from stone. Hannah felt her hope crumbling. Can we stop that? No. It has its own power supply and armored housing. My weapons can't damage it, and it can cut through the shelter walls in a few hours. Quan was quiet for a moment. We're out of time. I need to make a choice. He pulled up the broadcast relay system and connected Hannah's data chip. His fingers moved quickly across the interface, setting up transmission parameters and frequency ranges. This will send your evidence to every civilian communication network in the sector. News feeds, public forums, emergency broadcasts. Within an hour, millions of people will see it. But it will tell the Vrex exactly where we are. They already know exactly where we are. They're setting up a mining laser to cut us out of solid rock. Quan looked at her directly. The only question now is whether your data gets out before they stop us. And I'd rather bet on information moving faster than Vrex soldiers. Hannah thought about all the people who would see the evidence. The families of those already killed. The colonists marked for future testing. The officials who might actually have the power to stop it. Do it. Quan activated the relay. The transmission burst out in all directions, powerful enough to punch through jamming and reach the nearest communication satellites. Within seconds, it was bouncing to every corner of the sector. The response was immediate. Veth's communications exploded with incoming messages. Consortium officials demanding to know what was happening. News agencies requesting confirmation. Colony governors asking for explanations. The data was out, and there was no way to suppress it. On the external cameras, Hannah watched Veth receive a communication that made his whole posture change. He stood very still for a moment, then began barking orders. The Vrex soldiers started packing up their equipment. They're leaving, Hannah said in disbelief. They don't have a choice. The evidence is public. If they kill you now, it proves the consortium has something to hide. Better to retreat and let their propaganda teams try to spin it as fake or exaggerated. Quan watched the withdrawal carefully. But they'll leave surveillance in place. We're not safe yet. Over the next hour, the Vrex packed up and departed. The mining laser was loaded back onto the shuttle. The soldiers withdrew from the canyon. Even Veth eventually left, though Hannah could see his fury in every movement. But Quan was right about the surveillance. His sensors detected at least a dozen monitoring devices hidden throughout the canyon. Cameras, audio pickups, motion sensors. The Vrex wanted to know if Hannah tried to leave. What now? Hannah asked. Now we wait for the political situation to develop. Your evidence is causing problems across multiple sectors. I'm monitoring the news feeds. Quan showed her the displays. 3 colony governors have demanded investigations. 2 consortium officials have already resigned. The military command is claiming the program was unauthorized. Is it over? The weapons program? Probably not. But it's exposed. That makes it harder to continue and easier to fight. Quan shut down the defensive systems one by one. As for you, you'll need to testify eventually. Make your evidence official. But that means leaving the shelter. Hannah felt a strange reluctance at the thought. Over the past weeks, this shelter had become more than a hiding place. It had become a home. And Quan had become more than just an ally. He had become someone she trusted absolutely. Come with me, she said. You could testify about the defense systems. Your knowledge could help the investigation. Quan smiled slightly. I'm not a testimony kind of person. I'm a stay hidden and let the universe forget about me kind of person. He gestured at the shelter. This is my life, simple, quiet, under my control. It's lonely. Lonely is safe. Safe is what keeps me alive. But something in his expression softened. You're welcome to visit, though, if you survive the political aftermath and still remember where to find me. Over the next few days, Quan helped Hana prepare for departure. He gave her supplies, a communication device with encrypted frequencies, and detailed maps of safe routes through the frontier. He also gave her something unexpected, a small data chip. My personal logs, he explained. Technical details about how I designed these defensive systems. How I identified the flaws in consortium security. Everything I learned over 5 years of watching them from the shadows. He pressed it into her hand. Use it to help the investigation. But don't tell anyone where it came from. I'll protect your location, Hana promised. I know. You're good at keeping secrets when it matters. Quan looked at her seriously. Be careful out there. The consortium will try to discredit you. They'll claim you're a criminal, or a liar, or mentally unstable. Stay focused on the facts. Don't let them make it personal. On the morning of her departure, Hannah stood at the shelter entrance, looking back at the space that had kept her safe. Quan stood in the doorway, his expression as calm and practical as ever. Thank you, Hannah said, for everything. You didn't have to help me. No, I didn't. But I chose to anyway. Turns out humans are capable of that sometimes. Quan almost smiled. Take care of yourself, Hannah, and try not to start any more wars. No promises. Hannah smiled back. Then she turned and walked into the canyon, heading toward whatever came next. Behind her, Quan watched until she disappeared from sight. Then he sealed the entrance and returned to his shelter. He had repairs to make, defenses to rebuild, systems to improve. The Vrex assault had revealed weaknesses he needed to address, but as he worked, he found himself thinking about the Velian who had stumbled into his life and changed it in small but significant ways. He had been alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to have someone to protect, someone to teach, someone to trust. Maybe lonely wasn't as safe as he had convinced himself it was. Maybe safe wasn't the only thing that mattered. 3 months later, Quan's communication device received an encrypted message. He decoded it and smiled at the contents. The investigation is moving forward. 2 military officials arrested. Weapons program officially suspended. And I've been offered a position as a consultant for colony defense. I said yes, but only if I can take long vacations to visit friends in remote locations. Hope your shelter can handle guests. I'm bringing real coffee and actual food next time. Stay safe, Hannah. Quan typed a brief reply. Coffee is acceptable. Bring 2 bags. Guest protocols will be provided upon arrival. Don't trip over the new traps near the entrance. He sent the message and returned to his work. But he was already planning modifications to the shelter. A second sleeping area. Better food storage. Maybe even some entertainment systems. The universe was still dangerous. The consortium was still corrupt. The frontier was still harsh and unforgiving. But for the first time in years, Quan found himself looking forward to something other than simple survival. He looked forward to having a friend visit, and that, he realized, was what made humans truly dangerous. Not their weapons or their technology or their stubbornness. It was their ability to find hope and connection even in the darkest circumstances. To build something meaningful from nothing but determination and choice. The galaxy could keep its advanced civilizations and superior technology. Quan had something better. He had proven that one human with simple tools and absolute determination could stand against an empire and win. and he had made a friend along the way. That was enough.